to the Plutus Foundation webinar. We're doing a webinar today. We've been doing them all week, it seems like. And in fact, we've been doing quite a few of them the last month. And I am excited to talk about this topic today. It's really important for millions and millions of people right now. And that is unemployment and unemployment insurance and what is going on with unemployment throughout all the different states in this country. And how are people getting unemployment? Are they even getting through? So we have a lot to talk about today, and I think this is something that everyone's going to want to listen to quite a bit. So our guests today are Lillian Karabaic, and Lillian is from Oh My Dollar, where she has a weekly podcast as well as a weekly live stream. The weekly live stream is on YouTube, youtube.com/anomalily. So check that out. We'll have a link for you. And she also is the author of the book, A Cat's Guide to Money, Everything You Need to Know to Master Your Perfect Personal Finances, Explained by Cats. So definitely check that out. You can get the copy of that book on ohmydollar.com. So thank you for being here, Lillian.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about how much fun unemployment has been for everyone.
Oh, and it's and we also have Sandy Smith from Yes, I Am Cheap and the Elevate Community and Influencer Conference, as well as the Hustle Crew. Welcome, Sandy. How are you doing?
Good. I'm excited to talk about this subject.
That's great. So yeah, let's jump right into this. I know that people everywhere are trying to get through to unemployment. They want to get their checks when so many people are out of work. So let's start at the beginning here. Who is actually eligible now for unemployment, and has that changed since the CARES Act?
It has. According to the federal government, if you're listening, 33 million Americans have filed for unemployment since the COVID-19 crisis. So that's a level equivalent to the Great Depression. It's unheard of in the United States. So previously, you basically were eligible for unemployment benefits based on your state's rules. But typically, if you lost your job through no fault of your own, and you were employed with an employer who paid into the state's unemployment insurance system, you were typically eligible for unemployment. Well, the federal government has extended that to include freelancers and self-employed business owners who may or may not have been paying into the unemployment insurance in their state. So whereas a certain percentage of people would have normally been eligible for unemployment, due to the federal government stepping in and saying, basically, this is our fault, we'll extend benefits. And if your individual state chooses to accept the federal benefits, because the states have to decide yes or no, we're going to participate, then those benefits also extended to freelancers and self-employed individuals as well. But not everyone, but most people.
And there's also a group of people that are covered under this that might not have qualified before, that aren't just freelancers and self-employed. So the CARES Act tried to use unemployment essentially as the way to get cash to people that lost part of their hours. Previously, most states did not have a thing that said, if your hours get reduced, you qualify for unemployment assistance. But the CARES Act said, okay, well, if you lose part of your gigs or part of your hours, you may qualify for unemployment assistance. And then obviously people specifically affected by COVID-19. So folks that are immunosuppressed or quarantined and therefore cannot go into a job, even if their job is still operating, are now qualified. There's a whole class of people that might work for religious organizations that may not pay into their state's unemployment trust. So they think they're regular employees, but actually they wouldn't qualify for unemployment normally. Those folks are now supposedly covered under this. And this also covers folks that maybe cannot go into work or cannot perform work simply because their kid is now home from school because the school's closed. So there's a couple other categories of people in addition to freelancers and self-employed, which is like the biggest part of this that is new, I would say.
So Sandy, you mentioned that states have to choose whether they accept the federal assistance and new guidelines. What does that look like? What states are choosing to go along with this, and what states might be trying to do something on their own? Oh, I'm not hearing any sound from you, Sandy.
Sorry. I just about every state is choosing to go along with it because it would be pretty idiotic of them to not choose to go along with it.
It's free money.
That's basically what it is. Okay. It's free money, and in some cases, it extends benefits past the time that some states' benefits would normally run through. So most states, their benefits run between 12 and 26 weeks. In some states, it's extended benefits for an additional 13 weeks. Or in some cases, it's an additional $600, up to $600 per week through July or through the end of December, depending on which statute you fall under. So if I'm a state and I'm a governor of a state and now I'm seeing these record unemployment levels, right, knowing that my state unemployment insurance is going to dry up very quickly and I'm going to bankrupt the state, it would be very foolish of them not to take the federal money. And sometimes, previously, some states would have said no on principle to some federal, programs, depending on party. Sometimes it's party line, or they just choose not to on principle. But in this case, there's just so many people that have been affected that it's just a blanket yes. But technically, the law says if the state chooses to participate.
The states here, I think it's really important to understand how much differently this implementation varies by state. So even though these federal guidelines are accepted by the state, how everybody is applying the timelines, the different exceptions, a lot of them are varying by states, and every state is doing things differently. Mm-hmm. And it's a mess, right? So some, like New York State, which has had some of the highest levels of claims. I mean, they're also the second most populous state in the country, but New York State is still hasn't managed to get out checks to a lot of people that fell under the classic unemployment. These are folks that would have qualified even before the CARES Act. New York State is just so behind in trying to get checks out to people that there's people that put in claims weeks ago that haven't even heard from unemployment. Versus, Virginia has actually, I know multiple people there that actually managed to already get the self-employment checks, which were rolled out later in almost every state. And so it's really varying by state. Also, some states, waived their waiting period, and then other states still have kept around what is normally a 2 or 3 week waiting period, depending on the state. So just understand that your state really influences things. And there's also people that are filing in states that maybe they don't live in anymore, because usually it's based on your base periods of unemployment. So if you recently moved states, you're going to need to file with your old state. So correct. Yay.
They usually calculate based on quarters. So they'll go back up to 3 quarters to average out what your average weekly earnings would be. So this in some instances where you were in one state and you moved to another state, you may not qualify in your current state because you haven't earned enough time to qualify, right? But then your state may, for the most part, most will tell you that you won't qualify. So you'd have to apply at the previous state, and then they'd average out what you were earning and see what benefits you qualify in that way. But if you're self-employed, if you're an Uber driver or things like that, then you may not qualify under traditional unemployment, but you may qualify as a self-employed person, which is a little confusing to a lot of people, or as a freelancer.
So, I would say the most confusing thing is that a lot of states are implementing the self-employed and freelancer by asking you to apply and then get denied under the main system. Yes. So the confusion is, for a lot of people, is that this form is, I don't know how many people have followed, but essentially it was all programmed under COBOL, which is a language that most folks that are doing any computer programming these days don't know. And I was talking with our state PR representative for unemployment here in Oregon. And she essentially was like, this is a decades old system. We don't have the nimbleness to adapt to this, in addition to the fact that we're processing a amount of claims that is staggering. And so a lot of people are very confused because essentially the states don't have consistency on how they're asking you to apply for this new assistance available to freelancers and freelancers and independently contracted folks.
Yeah. So people, I think, who are suffering a financial impact because of COVID, what I've been doing individually is encouraging people apply anyway. Right? So people who would not normally have applied, for example, my daycare provider, we were just talking before we went live about daycare. So of course, I'm in New York, they've been forced to close. She's self-employed. She's a licensed daycare provider. She's a small business person. And as I was talking to her, making sure that I still had my spot for daycare whenever we open up, and I'm asking her how she's doing. And she's like, oh, I don't have any money coming in. I'm like, did you apply for unemployment? And she's like, no, because I'm self-employed. And I'm like, but you qualify. And she's like, no, I don't. I'm like, yes, you do. Apply anyway, right? So, and in some cases, people who may have lost their jobs previously, even before COVID, like if you lost your job towards the end of January and you're thinking, oh, I don't really, it doesn't apply to me because it's not really COVID related, apply anyway, because you may be eligible for benefits anyway.
And well, and the other thing to note too is a lot of folks that maybe did qualify under traditional unemployment but have exhausted their benefits. So in most states, you're given around 26 weeks. It does vary by state in a 2-year period. Once again, this is one of those things where every state does it a little differently. But sometimes people maybe had a bout of unemployment a year and a half ago and are like, oh, but now I'm unemployed newly, this new job I got, and I wouldn't qualify. But know that those extra weeks of unemployment, if every state accepted essentially this federal money, and that includes this extension of benefits. So even if you've previously exhausted it, you should be able to qualify. And then additionally, if you were about to start a job but didn't start it, so you don't have those base periods of unemployment, these previous quarters of work, this is theoretically supposed to cover you as well. Yeah. Once again,
depends
what's supposed to cover you, what state, it all varies. But what Sandy's saying is exactly what I have been telling people, which is like, if there's a chance, if your income is down due to something you can kind of tie to COVID-19, then you should apply.
And even if they deny you, appeal it. Because I know somebody who was denied, lost his job maybe a week before, COVID hit, and had applied and was denied for benefits. And I'm like, reapply, appeal the denial. And then he was denied again, technically under his regular unemployment insurance, but qualified under the extension, right? So then he got a check for retro. So even if you were previously denied, as we're saying, appeal it, apply anyway, apply again. There's no harm in you applying and just being told no, and appealing and being told no a second time, right?
Yeah.
No harm.
Other than your slow sanity, as you did. The loss of your sanity might be a factor there. But I think the other thing is that people maybe they hear $600 a week, and if they were making a good income before, they might hear that and go like, oh, that's not enough. I don't know anybody who's in the situation right now of wanting to turn down free money, but I know people for which they feel like it's better to focus on growing my business than it is to deal with this labyrinth of, trying to get a hold of unemployment or appealing them or whatever. But what a lot of people don't realize is if your income was very high in the past, in a lot of states, you're going to qualify for what is the maximum unemployment amount, which would, in my state, is $634 a week, plus that extra $600 of pandemic assistance, which for a lot of people is probably more than they were making before. Yes. But if you're in kind of the median or higher income side, it probably will 100% replace what you were taking home. And so it is knowing that it is actually a lot of money. Yeah, because if you've been on unemployment in the past, you're like, it barely paid for my bills. Yeah. It's meant to be an incentive to work normally. And so they keep it quite low. And if you didn't make a lot of money before, it wouldn't, it would barely pay for food. But that's not the case right now.
Yeah. If you're in a state like Florida where they basically pay you kitty litter before,
yeah.
Now it makes sense. Like Florida's unemployment's like 200 something bucks a week. That's like gas money and, you know, cans of cat food. Now it actually makes sense.
So I have so many questions. First,
go to state unemployment systems.
Yeah. So that's coming soon. So with being the effect of COVID being a qualifying factor for unemployment now, what are people being asked in order to prove that they were affected by COVID? Just in case that's something that may be preventing someone from applying, they're thinking, well, how am I going to show what is being used to kind of make that determination?
Again, the asterisk, state by state. But if you go to your state unemployment sites, they may have added or updated questions that you may not have been used to for unemployment insurance. They may have asked you, have your hours been reduced because of COVID? Did you lose employment because of, you know, COVID or because of a shutdown or quarantine order? Are you taking care of somebody who's been affected by COVID? Are you sick? Because those are the standard questions that you may be asked. Are you sick because of COVID? Has your business significantly reduced? Has all these kinds of myriad of varying questions, because basically the states are finding any little way that they can get you to qualify. They're trying to get you to qualify. Answer yes to something in that, you know, those questions.
And I would also say, unfortunately, not every state has updated their systems to be like set up for COVID, partially because they need to hire COBOL programmers. But what I would also say about that is, if you've experienced any downturn in your business, if you're a freelancer, like if you've seen your CPMs drop due to ad revenue, if you're reliant on ads, if you've had contracts canceled, if you were planning on speaking at a conference and that conference was canceled because of the gathering restrictions, all of that qualifies as a loss in income due to COVID-19. And I think that because we know that the current depression, we're in a depression, it'll be a depression because it's going to be 2 quarters of retracted growth, which is the definition of a depression as opposed to a recession. But this depression is due to COVID. It's not due to anything else. That other recession we were all waiting for that was due to some factor we didn't know about, it's here and it's due to COVID. And so if you are seeing any changes in your business's income, if your hours got cut or something, it's pretty easy to link it to COVID, simply because all these shutdown orders and everything, the impact was so seismic. So don't second guess yourself too much. Like, you know, even if you're like, I'm a book agent, I work on 2-year contracts, like it doesn't matter. If your hours got cut or your contracts are slowing down, it's probably due to the COVID shutdown. So
we should acknowledge, Harlan, I think that many people have not been able to get through or have not been able to complete the unemployment filing. So my husband, for example, was furloughed. Actually, and we asked for him to be furloughed because he's in a category that would be highly affected by COVID. He has asthma, and his boss was concerned. He's considered an essential worker, working on communications. So he had one of these little passes from the federal government that says that I'm allowed to be out working, right? So we asked for him to be furloughed on purpose. And it took about 3 weeks to finally get through to filing for unemployment. So we have to acknowledge that there are a lot of states and a lot of systems that are still down right now, where people who've been unemployed since March even have not been able to complete their filing. We should encourage them to continue trying to file, even if they have not been able to get through. Websites have been completely overwhelmed. Telephone systems have been completely overwhelmed as well. So they shouldn't think, oh, this happened back from March and I can't get through yet. It doesn't even make sense. I might not qualify. Not true. It will go retroactive. Continue trying to file, continue trying to get on the websites, continue trying to get on the phone. The volumes will go down now. I think we've hit the peak number of people who, were unemployed at one time. I think the number for today was 3 million who filed.
But I like how week. 3 million is like, we're like, oh, it's nothing.
It's down, right?
Nothing compared to 9 million.
Yeah. So now that we're 3 million people who filed this week, those are really people who finally got through the systems, right? They may have an opportunity now to finally get through to systems to, file for unemployment and, get their benefits and have that money be retroactive. So be encouraged, still do it.
Yeah. And the retroactive is, I think, really important for people to understand, especially people who are in that category of self-employed, independent contractor. And so they, their income started dropping quite a while ago. The systems weren't set up to accept them yet. Most states have rolled out some sort of plan at this point for self-employed, independent contractor. As of 2 weeks ago, my state unemployment office was telling me, we're working on it. We'll let you know. But most states have now rolled it out. And I think it's like, one, understand that when you finally do get through, if you qualify, you are going to be seeing a retroactive chunk. Every state that's how unemployment has always worked, is that it's retroactive. And then the other thing to know is that every state has staffed up unemployment offices. So like in Oregon, we had 150 people processing claims a month ago. We now have 450 people processing claims, and we're tiny. I mean, like, Oregon is a tiny state. And so just understand, like, they are working extremely hard to be able to process claims quickly. So as much as I don't tend to have a lot of faith in, Department of Human Services and fast unemployment claim processing, they recognize how essential this is for a lot of people, and they are really trying to meet the need.
So for someone who needs to apply for unemployment, I'm going to talk a little bit about the practical issues here. We know that they're not getting through, for the most part, to the system. But what is the process? Is it a website? Of course, a different website in every state. Is it a phone call? What is the best way to do it? And for someone who doesn't have internet access, how they're already at a disadvantage. What can they do to ensure that they get through?
So the best and easiest way to do it is, of course, via the web, if you have access. Some states do have their libraries available, or where you can potentially go and go do it at the library. Sometimes their unemployment offices, the physical offices, are open. You may be limited to how many people can actually go in to the office, or they may be closed, or they have condensed times. So double check to find out if the unemployment office itself, is physically open. Some states have telephone that you can call, because we do have some people who may have physical limitations. Actually, they all will take phone calls as well. But you may be sitting on the phone for just hours. Just be prepared, get a beverage, get a nice seat to sit on the phone, and be prepared to sit there for hours to be able to get through to somebody who can take your claim over the phone. They are required to have the ability to process for people who may be disabled, etc. So those are the two general options to do it. As we've noted, many of their websites are just down, point blank period. But maybe it may be in the middle of the night where you can get through on their website. And I'm glad that you acknowledge that there are people who may not have internet access, because they're people who are disproportionately affected, who will potentially have this be the case. It's unfortunate, because then those people are probably the ones who do need to physically go to an office to receive these benefits. I would encourage people as well, if you don't have internet access yourself, call a friend who does and walk through the process with them. I did this with my daycare provider. She's never filed unemployment. She has no clue, had no idea. So, I had her call me, and then I walked through the screens with her and filed unemployment for her, on her behalf. So be a little creative if you don't have your own direct internet access, but try to do it, the best way that you can to make sure that you get through and get your claim filed.
I would also note that if for folks that are hearing impaired, TTY services have actually been having better luck getting through to unemployment offices, which I hate to say, because I think a lot of people that do not rely on TTY have been trying to abuse that as a back end route to get into it. but a lot of TTY services have actually been getting call priority. And so they've been able to get through more easily. So if you do use deaf technology and you are using a TTT relay service, you might be able to get through more easily.
And we also acknowledge that there is a large population who are unemployed, who are not able to collect unemployment. And those may be people who previously may work off the books, or they may be undocumented. So there are those populations here. And it is very, very likely that a lot of them are currently unemployed right now. They're not able to, of course, file and claim for unemployment benefits. So just want to acknowledge that.
Is there anything we can do for those?
Those tend to be the folks, unfortunately, who you will end up seeing as seeing out there trying to make a living one way or another right now. And I believe that one of the reasons why you see such a large number of people, and depending on what state that you're in, infected being people of color and Latino and Black, is because of this. They're still going out there one way or another to try to make a living because they do not qualify for these benefits. So, you know, here we're seeing like 60%, you know, of deaths are people of color in New York. It's a high number compared to the total population. And they've still got to work. Their families still have to eat one way or another. They've still got to make a living. So that's what they're doing.
Yeah. The another thing I want to say about that is that there is, if folks are undocumented or don't have like a TIN or EIN, but they do own a business that is on the books, which quite a lot of undocumented people do. Perhaps they clean houses, something like that. They may actually qualify for a payroll protection loan, which could allow them to keep themselves on staff and essentially pay the average of what they were earning before. And that is, there's a small segment of undocumented folks or folks that are freelancers that might apply to, but it is worth noting that it is a different route in order to get some of this pandemic assistance if you wouldn't qualify for unemployment or for the stimulus payment.
Yeah, there is the PPP. I think people, many folks who are undocumented are afraid of being in the federal system one way or another. So, you know, we do have to acknowledge that they exist, that they do contribute one way or another to the economy, but they're not able to, for the vast majority of them, reap these benefits. And that's why the epicenter of the virus here in New York and New York City happens to be Queens and the Bronx, which has large populations that many of which are undocumented.
So while people who qualify are waiting to have their applications processed or even get their applications through, and those who are not applying for their belief that they won't qualify, and those who aren't applying because they don't qualify, what can they do right now to support themselves in this time of unemployment?
So we're seeing a lot of people taking advantage of social services. And of course, you're also seeing long lines of every time there are food giveaways and things like that, because your basic needs are your shelter and food. So people are taking advantage of those any way that they can. Here in New York and different states, they've had freezes on evictions for non-payment, and also for essential services such as the utilities. So your utilities won't be shut off if you can't pay. In New York, the freeze on evictions has just been extended through the end of August. So at the very least, yeah, you're gonna owe this money, but you won't be out on the street. Social services are overwhelmed right now because, of course, there's so many people who are clamoring for aid and additional things. I will say, and I run a group for people who are looking to supplement their income called the Hustle Crew, and I encourage people any way that they can to find a different way to make some money any way that they can right now legally. um, and put that asterisk there. Don't scam people. And there still are ways for people to make money, even in this climate. There are some things out there, gigs that will survive and are surviving through this pandemic. Many of them do require people to go out, but there are some that are perfectly fine for you sitting behind a computer if you happen to have one in your home, where you can take advantage of maybe some alternative income streams if you're not a person who qualifies for unemployment insurance, or you don't have a business, you can't get that. You can't apply for paper check protection. You don't qualify for the federal portion of the extended benefits. So the alternative is to do something else that will bring you in some money, even just survival money, and that's where your focus should be, survival money.
Yeah. I would also say that there are ways to be strategic about maybe money that you have right now if you do feel like unemployment money or some other money is coming in the future for you. So if you're sitting there waiting, you're a freelancer and you're waiting, and you had tax money saved up, taxes are now not due until July 15th. So if you normally would have paid your quarterly taxes and you had some money sitting there, if you haven't used it yet, that can be a way to pay your core essentials, make sure you still get food on the table. I would also note that the IRS is probably one of the best creditors to have to deal with of anybody out there. Like, they will give you a low interest rate. They will set you up on an automatic payment plan. And so as far as fear about owing taxes, generally, I would say that's like the lowest fear situation to be in. And a lot of people do have some tax money saved up. The other thing is if you are low income and you normally qualify for the earned income tax credit, or you get money back in your refund, file your taxes for 2019 if you haven't yet, because that is a money that you will get in the bank that can help you make it through until shutdown orders or your income turns around. And so that can be a way to get some extra money. And a lot of people will put off filing because they're afraid they might owe money. But if there's a possibility you might get some money, you will get that money now. But if you do owe, it's still not owed until July 15th. And then at that point, the IRS will actually let you implement a payment plan.
Going back a little bit to the idea of earning extra money, I just want to quickly throw in a pitch for yesterday's webinar where we talked about becoming a virtual assistant. It's a great way to bring in some extra income, and a lot of it could be skills that you already have, and you can apply it to companies that are looking. So that's one thing. Social services, I want to circle back to that. A lot of people don't want to take advantage of social services that are there because they feel that it is
the stigma.
Yeah,
it's funny because people who were high earners or people who never saw themselves in this situation are now the people who may qualify for social services. And what I've seen that's been happening since COVID is that people are seeing a different perspective now, that they probably never thought that they would be in this situation before. So a little judgy McJudgy pants is getting a little bit better in understanding how people live.
Sandy, do you think we're going to have empathy finally now from people who realize that the rug could have been pulled out on them and they're not protected by the fact that they earn a high income? I hope maybe we have empathy after this all. I don't know if it'll stick.
Well, we see what's going on outside with people not really having empathy now and protesting the right to go back to work. But anyway, I want to encourage people who have never applied for social services, have never thought that they would ever apply for social services, to go ahead and do so. We see people who are lining up for food giveaways and things like that. There is no shame in getting the essential services that you need to make sure that your family can eat or that your family can survive. That's one of our basic essentials as human beings. We all need shelter. We all need food. So if you've never been a person that has applied for benefits before, you may be in a situation right now where you do need to apply. And I would encourage you to go ahead and do so, because it may be something that could tide you over. I know in some states, they're increasing benefits for food for people currently, automatically, whether people have applied for it or not. So you may see more money on your food stamp, your EBT cards. So even if you may not have qualified before, you may qualify now. So my encouraging word for everyone is go ahead and apply for everything.
Yeah.
The only thing that you can hear is no. That's the worst thing that can happen to you is no. And then when you get back on your feet, pay it forward.
Yeah.
And then even when you hear no, it sounds like
no might not
there's an appeal.
Yeah.
I would also like, I would emphasize too, I think some people have a fear that like that they are maybe not, like if they get unemployment, they're taking it away from someone who deserves it more or needs it more. And I want folks to know that unemployment assistance and food assistance, these are not limited benefits. All you're doing is actually demonstrating the real need for it. So if you do qualify for it, you're not taking food out of a different baby's mouth when you apply for food stamps. That money is those are set there based on need, not based on a limited pool. I know with payroll protection assistance, that was a limited pool. And so a lot of people internalized that kind of narrative about unemployment, but it's simply not true there. Also, if you are, I'm a Midwesterner, I really struggled when I first needed social services in my life with like an internal pride thing. But if you've never heard of mutual aid before, mutual aid can be one of those things that you can take advantage of that maybe for you might feel easier because you know that in the future you will be able to provide mutual aid to others. And there's a lot more mutual aid societies that have popped up in most cities. So if you are in a city, look for your city mutual aid, and you might be able to see ways in which you can help people that in exchange you can get what you need.
How does that work? How does a mutual aid society work?
It really depends on how it's structured. It's good old anarcho-syndicalism. So, but a lot of mutual aid societies, some of what they're doing is people can say, hey, I need these specific groceries. And then someone else can say, I need help applying for unemployment assistance. And you might have the gift of time or a particular skill where you're able to help someone else in the mutual aid society. And then someone that does have that cash can help you with groceries. Quite a lot of mutual aid societies are doing food assistance right now where they're going around and delivering groceries to folks that need it. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of us are just so stressed out right now. We want to feel like we can help, but we're trapped in our house. And so a lot of folks are actually using, their newfound free time now that they're unemployed to be able to help with some labor, like being able to go to the grocery stores and wait in lines and stuff like that.
Yeah, that sounds like a great thing about people coming together and helping each other out. Circle back to unemployment insurance just a little bit. Are there any positive stories that you're hearing? People actually getting what they need?
Of course.
This week.
You got through?
So Virginia, we've had 2 listeners in Virginia who have gotten that are freelancer small business owners who have actually gotten unemployment. And Virginia is the first state I know where freelancers and unemployed people have actually gotten it. And I also know someone who is a pharmacist, so in an essential role, but her son is going through chemotherapy. And so she was very worried about exposing herself to the virus, especially because they were not providing PPE for the pharmacists in this retail environment. And she was able to actually get a note that said, hey, I need to isolate because I'm exposing my immunosuppressed, 2-year-old son. And, it took quite a while to be able to do it, but it did actually come through this week. And so she now has the resources to actually stay home and not potentially expose her kid to coronavirus. So
here in New York took the liberty of shutting down the unemployment system and having it basically reprogrammed and brought back up again about 2 weeks ago. So it now has the capacity to finally start processing the backlogs and people who could not get through previously. And as you know, we're pretty much decimated here in New York when it comes to people being able to work, especially in the city and New Jersey. because we're not just affected here in New York. If you're in New York City employs a lot of people in Connecticut and New Jersey, a smattering from Pennsylvania as well, and up the state. So New York City is a financial hub, so having the unemployment insurance down for some time was really affecting quite a lot of people within the region. So they redid the entire website. They're now able to go back and process these claims that were not yet processed, and then people are now able to get through the website, so things are coming through. I think the larger states that probably saw a lot of unemployment claims all at one time, everybody was rushing through the door at one time, right, are now finally able to start processing those claims and getting the backlog and getting money out to people. Today I heard from somebody who I had encouraged who was denied their normal unemployment insurance claims and got paid under the pandemic assistance program. So he got a direct deposit directly into his bank account before he even knew that he was approved for it. Wow. So
yeah,
it was nice, right?
I've been hearing a lot of people who find out that it finally got approved via a deposit, which is like, no, it's not the worst way to find out. So that I feel like that's one of the more uplifting things when people are like, hey, money has appeared in my account. I guess I'm approved.
Yeah. So those funds are finally coming through for the rest of us and for people who do need the funds. I know that people are hearing mostly just about the large business loans and the grants that went out, and you're hearing about that on the news, and you're hearing nothing but negative about for the individuals who are getting their unemployment or needing their unemployment. But know that they are going out, know that people are getting approved, know that the extended benefits are going out to people who need it. And if you've previously been unemployed or denied your unemployment insurance, again, I want to encourage you to go back and apply again. Or if you could not get through previously, go back and try again right now to see if you can qualify under any number of these programs within your particular state. Also, if you think the money isn't worth it, if you're in Florida with the cat food money, the cat food money is now like tripled. So go ahead and apply so that you can get more than this measly $200 and something that they give for 12 weeks. And now it could be $840 that you're getting per week. So go ahead, go back and apply. And also, for people who never thought that they would see themselves in a situation like this, you have paid into the unemployment insurance system. You, your employer, if you were a freelancer as well, you've paid your taxes. You should avail yourselves of these services. There is no stigma attached to making sure that you're able to provide for yourself, especially in a situation like this. I've unfortunately had to talk people off the ledge with this and get them to understand that it's okay. You should be able to use these services, especially right now. And especially if you have small children, you're elderly, you're immunocompromised, you can't go out there and make a living, go ahead and apply for social services as well. You may just qualify for, food benefits right now where you may not have qualified previously. Everyone needs to eat and everyone needs a roof over their head. Make sure you take care of those two things.
Yes, everything Sandy said. Just agreeing.
This is all very encouraging, and I hope people listening to this will take this to heart and don't give up, especially when the website's not responding or the form doesn't go through the first time. Just keep doing it, keep at it. Is there anything else we should cover before we say goodnight?
I do want to just very briefly let people know about the form of income documentation they might need if they are a freelancer, because it can be really confusing because the form's like, here, enter from your pay stub. And you're like, I don't have a pay stub. So most states are going to accept just your word for it, and then they might take out an appeal. But in that case, you would only get the minimum benefit amount. If you do want to appeal for a higher amount because you, for example, were earning more than the cat food money in Florida would qualify you for, then you would need to appeal. I recommend, if you have not filed your 2019 taxes yet, once again, Reminder that you will not have to owe anything yet till July 15th, but that form of documentation is going to be good. And for most states, unemployment for freelancers is going to be based on your net income. So for W-2 employees, it's based on their gross income, but for a freelancer or a small business owner, it's going to be based on their net income, which is everything after what you take off what's on your Schedule C. I know that's a lot of it sounds like a lot, but just generally know it's going to be your net income, which is not your adjusted gross income. Generally, people like me are like, take all the deductions you can.
Yeah.
However, this is the one case, it's one of two cases. I tell people before they try to qualify for a mortgage, if they're self-employed, you want to do the opposite, which is that it might be worth it to pay a little bit more in taxes. In this case, you might want to file for, slightly more income and take less business deductions for 2019 so that you can raise your base amount. And there's a pretty good calculator that you can find. Let me find the name of the form, because of course it has some terrible government form name. It's form 196PUA. If you Google that, you should be able to kind of calculate what amount of the unemployment assistance you will get. And that can be extremely helpful. And then the other thing to let people know, if you've never applied for unemployment before, you might not realize this, but the reason we keep referencing a weekly amount is that unemployment, every week, you have to then again file with them, which has been one of the really frustrating things for people, but you're supposed to check in every single week in order to get that weekly benefit amount. So that's still going to be true if you're a freelancer or self-employed, and any income you do bring in during that week, you have to report. Just know that you don't want to get into a situation where they're calling fraud on you. So if you got paid, $30 from driving someone around on Uber that week, you do need to report it. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't necessarily qualify, but your benefit amount might be reduced that week.
Yeah, that reminds me of back in the day when you had to actually go to the unemployment office every week to get your check and prove that you were looking for a job and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Actively looking with keywords, right?
Oh yeah, and that's the other thing, is that they completely redefined what actively looking for work means, because it used to be that you had to say I've applied for this many jobs. Every state it's a little bit different, but they're essentially saying if you are quarantined, if you're hospitalized, if your employer says they're hoping to hire you back eventually, but they can't right now because they're shut down, all of that still qualifies as actively looking for work. Mm-hmm. So don't feel like you need to please don't go knock on doors applying for jobs right now in order to keep qualifying for unemployment. Once again, it will vary by state, but the definition of actively seeking work is very broad under the CARES Act. Yeah. Because we don't want you to leave your house. Please don't.
We should note one thing. If you're furloughed, you qualify. If you have a job and you're not furloughed, you're not affected by COVID yourself, you're not caring for somebody with COVID, you don't have a doctor's note that says I can't go out because the air is going to kill me, and you decide that you're not going back to work on your own, that's a whole different situation.
Yes.
You may not qualify for unemployment, because they will consider that you refused to work.
Yep.
Or you resigned. And in most cases, if it's through your own fault, you will not qualify. So just keep that in mind. Even though we keep telling you apply, let them deny you, this is a case where you may be denied. And I'm saying that because I know there are people who are putting themselves out in harm's way and they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Totally understandable. I wouldn't be risking my life either. Shout out to you guys who do that essential work.
Thank you so much, all of the grocery store employees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing I do is essential. But if you decide, listen, my life is worth more than going into work at this job, totally justifiable. But just know that you may not qualify for unemployment benefits.
Yeah, one thing I will note is that if you do work for an employer like that and they're large enough, there is different, some of them have unpaid leave that you can essentially take if you do fear for your safety. And some do have paid leave, but this is where we're really seeing employees like at Amazon and things like that get screwed over, is they're requiring a COVID-19 test that says that you're positive, but ain't nobody able to get a test. So that can be one of those things where they're saying, don't come into work if you have any symptoms because you're going to get your coworkers sick, but you wouldn't qualify for that paid time off. So that's one of the cases where the system is really falling apart. The other thing I will say is if you are scared of going into work and you might just possibly fall into one of those categories, most doctors are scared enough that please just reach out to your primary care physician or a friend that happens to be a doctor and ask if they think they could write a note for you. So like I'm in the case where I'm immunosuppressed, and 4 months ago, I was working at Starbucks. So man, am I glad that I was not making coffee in the middle of a mall Starbucks. But that would have been one of the cases where my rheumatologist reached out and said, hey, you take an immunosuppressant, like, please don't leave your house if you can avoid it. So you might not realize you're at higher risk.
There are some cases where you would qualify for federal benefits under different statutes.
Yes.
So let's not forget, if you're caring for somebody, there is FMLA for you to take time off. And some states have rolled out family medical leave acts individually that's paid as well. So maybe you're sick, you're caring for somebody else, you can get this doctor's note, you got something else that may fall under one of those other statutes. You've got a kid at home like I do that you've got to care for because you're their primary caregiver. Any one of those, you find a box that you fit and you stuff yourself into it and find a benefit that you can apply for. So maybe you don't qualify for unemployment insurance, but maybe you would qualify for, don't quit your job, but maybe you would qualify for family medical leave. Maybe you'll qualify for FMLA to get some, FMLA is unpaid, but at least you'll get 12 weeks, off, up to 12 weeks off and more, depending on if you're in the Army or you're caring for somebody in the military. There are other different factors. It could be more time. Try to find something that you do qualify for and check that box for yourself. If it's paid, even better. So look for your state's statutes on family leave, and there are different variations, but typically it's called family leave. And many states have enacted those, and many of those are paid, and that's not unemployment that you may qualify for depending on your situation. But
it does mean, but it will mean that your job is held on to, essentially. Yes. And it also means that you would still be able to be on the group health insurance, which is obviously a big thing to think about. Oh, I wanted to say one. We just keep thinking of things to say.
That's all right. It's great.
But we mentioned a bunch of different benefits that people might qualify for. They might not think about, like, SNAP, which is food stamps, and unemployment. Another thing to know is that if you are a freelancer or you otherwise are getting your health insurance through the exchange, you may have a change in income due to this, and the amount of subsidy you get, even if you previously weren't receiving a subsidy, you may now qualify for a subsidy to lower the amount you pay in your premium. And in most cases, not in every state, but in most cases, you'd be able to just keep the same plan, but be paying less per month for it. If your income has completely dropped off, in states that do have Medicaid expansion, then you would then qualify for the Medicaid expansion. In Oregon, we call it Oregon Health Plan. It's like Washington Apple. They all have cute names, they think. But if they do have that, that is a way for you to still get health insurance that will cover you. In most states, Medicaid is actually pretty good health insurance. For a lot of people, it's better than anything they've had through a nice employer before. But once again, don't go quit your health insurance until you've been reassured you're going to keep having it. This is not the time to lose healthcare coverage. So.
Yeah, this is all amazing. Why don't we wrap this up? I think if anyone has any further questions, they can, of course, reach out to us and to you. So why don't we, Lillian, if you want to explain to everyone how they can find you. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm Lillian. My show is called Oh My Dollar, which you can find, just search for Oh My Dollar, like, oh my God. You can also find me on the Oh My Dollar forums or on Twitter at Anomalily, which is like anomaly, but Anomalily. And I do live streams every single Saturday at 5 p.m. And I usually try to answer almost all the questions I get during the live streams, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah. And Sandy?
So you can find me everywhere as Yes, I Am Cheap. where I help people live their best financial lives. Or you can connect with me as well as I am Sandy Smith, the number 2 on every social media platform.
All right, fantastic. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks, Harlan.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, good luck to everyone out there.